back to our regularly scheduled programming. It is good to be joined once again by my buddy Dane Brugler, back from his travels. Dane, it's good to see you, man. How we doing?
I'm good. Thanks to Trevor for filling in. You guys did awesome. I listened to the pod on my flight. Robert and I were in New York for some work stuff, and happy to be back now because we've got a lot to cover here. We're November, Halloween's over, so it's like that to me feels like all right, now season's over. We got a month left before the season's over. Some of these guys, we're almost out of tape. And so it's like the last go for some of these players to put good stuff on tape for scouts and for teams, kind of like a last audition type of thing. So it's going to be a busy next month.
So a quick programming note. We're going to do the top of the show pretty similar to what we've been doing. We're going to hand out some game balls from this past weekend, but we're going to depart in the interest of that. I love this idea, Dane. With so few games remaining for a lot of these teams, we want to highlight some of the lesser known prospects that we think you should know. And you wrote a story about this for The Athletic last week. And we just want to highlight, look, I mean, we've covered most of the powerhouse programs, most of the teams that are going to fill up the college football playoff bracket. We've spent a fair amount of time on those teams, but we want to highlight some programs, some names that maybe we haven't had a chance to talk about. Again, if we're building the beast, my main goal in this show is to familiarize the listener with as many draft eligible players as possible, whether that's a top 10 pick or a fifth round guy. Hey, great week to bring him up. How about that, bud?
That is a perfect example of how deep last year's running back class was. For a guy like that to fall to the 7th, and I get it, his testing wasn't great, but I mean he entered last season as one of the top senior running backs, and then he had a good season. It was fine. It wasn't amazing. And then, the All-Star season didn't go great, but he was still a talented player. And so I get it. It was the Bengals defense, but credit to Kyle Monangai, the rookie running back for the Bears, who just was awesome. I mean, I tweeted this earlier. He's number 2 in the NFL right now, among all running backs. In terms of percentage of his runs over 5 yards. Only James Cook has more, or the percentage is higher. It's like 45%. So given his opportunities, he's been awesome.
Playing the Cincinnati Bengals defense will have that effect on a guy's stat line.
Yeah.
So that's a great example of what I'm talking about. We want to highlight some guys that maybe aren't being discussed at the top of the 2026 draft class, but are absolutely worth highlighting. So we're going to get into that later in the show. And it coincides perfectly with, I believe, Dane, it'll be next week's show. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you have your updated top 50 coming out, and we're going to dive into everything going on there, the big changes from the preseason edition, the big movers, maybe guys that dropped a little bit, what your late season analysis is compared to what you said in August. So today we will be looking into some more under the radar names, and next week we can dive into some of the really big heavy hitters in your November top 50.
Yeah, can't wait, because that's really the top 50 is already mapped out. Because I always try to get me the first 2 months, give me 2 months of tape, then I'll update the top 50. They wanted me to wait till next week to post it because we've got a lot of trade deadline stuff this week, and the All-Star, my midseason all rookie teams coming out this week. So just to give it some more time to breathe, it's going to come out next week, but really it's already done. So yeah, I can't wait to talk about some of these guys with you on next week's show.
The hay is proverbially in the barn. Maybe one last opportunity to make an impression coming up this weekend. All right, so let's get into our game ball segment, and I think that is a perfect segue because look, it's been a running joke since August. We've talked a lot about this guy from the very beginning of the season against the Texas Longhorns. But at the top of this show, as we're handing out game balls and maybe previewing your November top 50, I think it's time to have a longer conversation about Mr. Arvell Reese at Ohio State and exactly what he's doing. And like I said, we've joked about it every week. I mean, you were on the guy immediately, and the case for drafting him highly has only gotten stronger as we've gone. And then you get a big showcase opportunity, big noon against, I know not a good Penn State team, but a Penn State team with a lot of NFL draft prospects. And Arvell Reese just wrecked shop, man. 12 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss in a sack, and a sack in a demolition of the Nittany Lions. And so I other than just saying, holy shit, this guy's really good, I want to have a longer conversation about where this is heading for Arvell Reese, because the hype train, it left the station a long time ago, man. We're tearing down the track at like 150 miles an hour.
Yeah, and kinda like you set up there, like, it was pretty obvious from the start this season, from that Texas game on, that number 8, for the Buckeyes, he's just different. 6'4", 240 pounds, to have his length and power, but also the burst and closing speed, but also he's not just an athlete out there. Like, he is a pure football player. The violence in his hands, it's rare stuff. So he can take on blocks. What he did to Drew Shelton, left tackle for Penn State, was unbelievable, setting an edge. I mean, he'll take on pullers. He will shed blocks with ease. He will chase them down. The dip and rip that he has around the edge is phenomenal. So it's just, he's a fun player to watch. And I said this before on the show, but my favorite thing to do, either Saturday night or Sunday morning, is to fire up that Ohio State defensive tape just to see, all right, what's Reese going to do this week? And so far, he hasn't let me down. I tweeted Saturday night kind of his 7 best plays from that Penn State game from the All-22, and it's just like, this guy, I'm running out of things to say about him. I'm just gonna show you. Like, this is what a really good player looks like. And so yeah, like I referenced, my top 50 comes out next week. And all right, I'm just going to spoil it. Reese is going to be number 1. He is the best player that I've scouted this year, plain and simple. I don't know that he'll actually go that high, like at being the number 1 overall pick, but it would be very disingenuous for me to put anyone else at number 1 besides Arvell Reese, because the tape is that good, and every week I kind of rave about him, and so I would be lying if I put anybody else at number 1.
This is such perfect timing, because we've reached the time of year again where, like, draft order is starting to feel real now. Like, the teams that might be drafting highly are starting to come into clear focus. And I saw last week, like, draft accounts and college film accounts are posting like early mock drafts. Not that I care about that specifically, but NFL fans who maybe don't follow college football are seeing Arvell Reese as a top 5 pick, and they're like, oh my God, an off-ball linebacker? Like, no, you can't do that. And people that are watching college football like you and me are like, oh, buddy, that's not what you're getting in Arvell Reese. So when you talk about drafting a guy this highly, and I don't think it's crazy at all to say that he's the best player of the guys that we've watched so far this season. But what do you think his role would look like? Like, let's just assume he is a top, I don't know, whatever, 8 NFL draft pick.
Mm-hmm.
And we brought up the comps to Micah Parsons before. Like, we've talked about that briefly. Like, what are you drafting this guy to do, and what do you think his role looks like for an NFL team, other than just wreak havoc?
Yeah, well, and it's tough because how Ohio State uses him is kind of perfect. You know, like they really use him as a hybrid. And Matt Patricia, defensive coordinator, obviously an NFL background. And you look at what he did in New England with guys like Dante Hightower and guys like that, where you really like what they do downhill. But it's just how you deploy it. How do you weaponize it? Do you use him as, is it a 3-4 scheme where you have 3 down linemen and then who's that 4th guy? A lot of times it's going to be Arvell Reese. You just don't know where it's going to come from. Using him as a spy has been so advantageous for this defense, to have an athlete like that as a spy who can play in space. But then when he has a beat on the quarterback, he can close like that. They don't ask him to drop too much, but when they do, he looks comfortable doing it. He doesn't look like a fish out of water in space. And so I think last year, Jalen Walker was the 15th pick to the Falcons. Like Arvell Reese is a much better version of that, especially as a pass rusher, where he's, like I mentioned, violent with his hands, his burst around the edge, the way he can dip and contort his body. So that's going to be part of why you draft him high and how you deploy him. How much you do that, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. It's just you want him to be as disruptive as possible. And if you want him to be a full-time edge, why couldn't he do that? With the way that he can set an edge against the run, the way he can get after the quarterback, why couldn't he be a full-time edge? And I get it. He's listed 6'4", 240, and that's maybe not ideal size, but he's bigger than Micah Parsons and much longer than Micah Parsons. And I get it. Parsons is 101, but this is a very unique special football player. And I don't think every defensive coordinator is going to kind of look at it a little bit differently, but that's kind of the appeal of this guy is you don't have to put him in one little box. He can do a lot of different things for you.
I'm glad you answered my question for me, because I was just going to point out, as fun as it is watching him do it, Arvell Reese has 71 pass rush snaps this year on 379 snaps total. So he's rushing the passer a little less than 20% of the time. So it's not like this is his full-time job, but I'm glad to hear you say that, because watching him do it, I think he could absolutely at least do it more often than he is doing it for Ohio State, if not full-time. I mean, the efficiency is off the charts too. Like, he's rushing the passer like 8 times a game and getting 3 pressures a game to go with 8 sacks. So like 40% of the time he's rushing the quarterback, he's having the intended effect. Like, I think you could probably bump those numbers up a good bit if you wanted to.
Yeah, and I don't think that the efficiency will necessarily go away if the pass rush snaps increase. I think, and that's the appeal with this guy, is all the different ways he can impact your team, depending on the offense that you're playing. He is a joker of a defensive player. That's kind of how he is, and that's like, I understand why that would scare some people. If we're talking about a top 5 draft pick, potentially number 1 overall, I get it. Drafting a quote unquote hybrid player that early, but there's a difference between being a hybrid player and then being kind of a tweener, like stuck in between two positions. Like, he's not a tweener at all. There is nothing that on his tape that you can point to and say he can't be a defensive end. There's nothing on his tape that you can point to and say he can't be a linebacker. So, I just think you have to get whatever that timeshare is, and you have to feel comfortable with it and understand how to weaponize a guy like this. So coaching's a big part of it. But if you have the right coaches who can unlock all of that and really spread his talents across the front of the formation, man, yeah, it could be really special. It could.
These are conversations we can have between January and April, but just off the top of my head, last time we kind of talked about who the best prospect in this draft class was, we landed on Ruben Bain. And still having a phenomenal season, but how do you balance those two things? Like a true down edge versus, I hate to call Arvell Reese a projection, but like, he is a guy that, at the very least as an edge rusher, doesn't do it full time. Like, how do you weigh those two things?
Yeah, and I think with Bain, honestly, one of the themes of Miami's now has 2 losses. They've lost twice. One of the themes of those 2 losses, it was very quiet games from Ruben Bain. He was not able to make a big impact in those games. Not saying he's the reason they lost those games by any means. Now, if you want to talk about Carson Beck, that's a different story. But sticking with Bain, like, yeah, he is a more, you look at him and you see him more of a traditional defensive end. He is a dense 275 pounds, while still having that get off, while still having a lot of things that you want from an edge rusher who can win with some edge speed. So I think it definitely is a little bit more of a contrast of skill sets, and that is something I'm sure we'll be talking about between now and April, is just maybe the more traditional route, or a guy that's a little more unique, and just you have to trust your coaches to use them the right way.
Plenty of time to talk about that, but Arvell Reese, well deserving of this sort of conversation, and I'm not surprised based on talking to you all season to hear that he's going to lead this top 50 next week. I'm excited to dive into that. Let's
Am I crazy? Like, is that
no,
okay? I just want to make like
brother.
I
I watched this guy every week
yeah.
just humiliate people. And also and his range and his speed, like his closing speed just as a linebacker is incredible too. Like he you're not saying anything out of line. And like I don't want to speak too hyperbolically because there's a lot left to do in this process and the transition to the NFL is a tough one for everybody, but all I can say is I would be really excited to draft this guy highly. That's me.
Well, and something with this draft too, and this is something I struggled with when I put my top 50 together was it's just not a great top 5, top 7, like in terms of
I think
like
that's part of it. I mean, yeah, I think it's fair to say like the top of this draft isn't as sexy as some past years. Maybe
yeah,
that's part of it, but
definitely it
this is
is.
still this is an incredibly exciting prospect
Yes.
regardless.
100%. Both things are true.
We can spend a little less time on Carnell Tate, but I wanted to hand to him a game ball. And here's my thesis for you, Dane. And it's I'm speaking purely for myself, not anybody else. But knowing that Jeremiah Smith was coming behind him, I don't want to say I wrote Carnell Tate off, but I wasn't that excited. I was like, okay, yes, of course, Ohio State has really good receivers. He's a good receiver, but he's no Jeremiah Smith. Like that's the guy we need to focus on, and that might still be true. But week by week, I become more excited by Carnell Tate and more convinced like this guy's just a badass in his own right, and probably it's probably not fair that he was as overshadowed as he was because he does it again against Penn State. Another just circus catch touchdown. I love this dude's physicality at the catch point and after the catch. Like the fact that he turned that into a touchdown instead of going down at the 2 or 3 yard line. I love this guy and I personally don't feel like I gave him his just due early enough because every week he just looks like a more and more exciting player.
Yeah, I think there was a little bit of, prove it to me first with him. Like he was a 5-star guy and he had some production last year for Ohio State, but obviously playing behind J.J. Smith and Emeka Egbuka, and he didn't see as many targets as he has this year, but he has taken his game to another level this year. So it's watching him; he's so detailed with every step, and that's what I love about him. It's not, yeah, he's 6'3", over 200 pounds. The physicality, like you mentioned, the ball skills are there, but he's a very detailed receiver, and so I love him on those vertical stems. His ability to build up his speed. And it just really opens up the way that he can beat coverage, whether it's a straight 9 route, some type of double move. He's very detailed with each one of those steps. So the pacing is there, and then just the acceleration where he can go make a play, tracks the ball beautifully, strong through the catch, and then, yeah, it doesn't go down easy. He's not a guy that's going to break a lot of tackles in terms of just his elusiveness, but he is physical as a finisher. I've mentioned it before, but outstanding along the sideline. So he's a guy that I keep bumping up more and more because he just every week he shows you more, shows you that it's no fluke. He's being consistent. He doesn't drop the ball. So yeah, big fan of Carnell Tate, and he's gonna be. You don't have to read very long in the top 50 to find him.
It's not shocking that this is where Ohio State is, right? Like we had a feeling they would have a chance to put together a title defense with all the talent that they have. But in my opinion, they look a step or two better than everybody else in the country so far. And I think you can point to guys like this ascending and like not just like maintaining but taking that next step and looking like these sorts of prospects. I think that's a big reason for it. Obviously Julian Sayin continuing to play out of his mind. He's not draft eligible for our purposes, but the story of this Ohio State team is they were already loaded, but all the right guys seem to be improving as the season goes along too.
No doubt. And I try not to watch guys that aren't draft eligible, but it's hard not to keep an eye on Julian saying how accurate he is, how poised. Like there's just no panic in the way he plays, and it's fun to watch. But I'm really looking forward to Michigan, and then if they get past Michigan, Big Ten championship game, whether that's probably Indiana, which would be a lot of fun, and then what they do in the playoffs against some better opponents, some better defenses, like that's going to be a lot of fun to watch this talented team go up against some better opponents down the stretch.
If this Ohio State team can't get past this Michigan team, then
It's in
we
Ann
really
Arbor.
gotta
I mean,
we gotta have a conversation about what's in this team's head when it comes to the school up north. Because
I thought that last year. I mean, they were
yeah, fair.
clearly a better team than Michigan last year, and it was at home, and they couldn't do it. So, obviously they went on to win a national title, and it is what it is. But this year, being in Ann Arbor, that's a tough place to go play, and it feels like all the pressure's on Ohio State necessarily. But yeah, we'll have plenty of time to talk about that game.
Banners hang forever, but you gotta find a way to beat Michigan.
Gotcha.
All right. We got we've talked plenty of Ohio State. We got 2 new names to hand out game balls to, but before we do that, let's take a quick break.
This episode of the Athletic Football Show is brought to you by our friends at Facebook. Every year around this time, there's that one night when everyone's back in town, Thanksgiving Eve. You swing by your old bar, see some familiar faces, maybe even reconnect with an old teammate you haven't talked to in years. That's what Facebook's all about, those little connections that end up meaning a lot. Maybe it's someone posting in your high school alumni group saying they're home for the holidays. Or maybe you find out about a local turkey trot where you dress up with family through a Facebook event. Even hopping on Marketplace to grab something to spice up your home ahead of Thanksgiving can spark a new friendship. This season, Facebook's reminding us that a little connection goes a long way. So if you're heading home, hop on Facebook, check out your group's events Marketplace, and see who you might reconnect with. Let's reconnect this holiday season with Facebook.
All right, Dane, I was excited to talk about this guy, and I'm combing through college football, looking for stuff that jumped out to me, looking at my notes from Saturday. And we've talked plenty of Texas Tech, and we've talked a lot about David Bailey specifically, but I wanted to hand out a game ball to the other edge rusher on Texas Tech's defense who made a huge play. They dispatched Kansas State, and I feel like Texas Tech has a knack for doing this where they win a game by 20 plus points and you assume that it was easy the whole way through. And they are experts at putting the game away with like 5-6 minutes to play. So in this game, Kansas State's been red hot for a minute. They're up 29-20. So like they got a 2-possession lead, but Kansas State very much alive with 5 minutes to play. They get the ball back in their own red zone. And on the very first snap, the guy I want to highlight, Mr. Romello Height of Texas Tech, he just whips the right tackle, strip sacks Avery Johnson. The fumble gets returned for a touchdown, and now we're in the clear. It's 36-20. I think Texas Tech finished, they won 43-20 as a final, and a game that was nervy at times becomes a laugher. And just a really nice moment for Romello Height, who has 40 pressures, 5 sacks, 8 quarterback hurries of his own behind David Bailey. And this Texas Tech team firmly part of the college football playoff situation, and having 2 edge rushers that look like they will be meaningful NFL picks is a big part of that.
Yeah, David Bailey is going to be a first-round pick. Like that's pretty much done. Height is a little more complicated because he's 6'2 and a quarter, 230 pounds. Like there are linebackers bigger than him. And so where does he fit? The burst and the effort off the ball are outstanding, and that's enough to beat a lot of college tackles. The play that you were referencing, that strip sack, his ability to abruptly transition and then flatten to the quarterback, that's different stuff. Like that's awesome. Like that's what you want to see from that type of player. But exactly what position is he? I don't think he's a DPR necessarily, but where are you playing him? Is that enough to take him on day 2, round 3? For some teams, maybe. Other teams, probably not. So he's just a really interesting player. He's a 6-year senior. This is his 4th team, I believe. So he's been around for a little bit and playing his best ball when it matters the most.
2 years at Auburn, spent a year at Georgia Tech. and he was one of several big-time transfers to this Red Raider defense. And safe to say, it's been money well spent. I mean, they got to get this thing over the finish line. They have a big game this weekend against BYU.
Oh, yeah.
But like David Bailey, Jacob Rodriguez, the
I said we'd be
linebacker up
remiss
there.
if we didn't mention Jacob Rodriguez, because he had 2 more forced fumbles against Kansas State. He's now up to 7 forced fumbles on the year, and he's really mastered that peanut punch technique. It's awesome to watch. And so as a prospect, he's pretty average from a size speed perspective, but the toughness that he plays with around the football is awesome. So yeah, if we're going to mention David Bailey and Height, we got to mention Jacob Rodriguez too.
You got to love that the program that struggled to win with Patrick Mahomes putting up video game numbers is now with Patrick Mahomes as a invested donor now putting together a fire-breathing defense. I love it. One other guy I wanted to highlight. We've talked about him before, but not in a minute. And I remember early in the season, you talked about Georgia linebacker C.J. Allen. You mentioned that he wears the same number as Roquan Smith did in college, number 3 for the Bulldogs. And no disrespect, but like early in the season, I was just like, I don't think I see it. But it's coming together here over the last few weeks. Like he had a nice game against Auburn a couple weeks ago, and then on Saturday against Florida, 13 tackles, 7 solo stops. He had PFF charts like stuffs or stops, like tackles that lead to an unsuccessful play. More than half of his tackles were charted as stops by PFF. 4 red zone tackles. Good day in coverage. Oh, and he had a pressure that led to a 3rd down throwaway by DJ Lagway as well. So a game where like you just notice the off-ball linebacker popping off the field every single snap. He was phenomenal, and he very much reminded me of Roquan Smith against the Gators.
And Georgia needs him to kind of be Superman, because this is not the Georgia of 3 years ago where it's just every level of the defense is 1st-round picks, 2nd-round picks. Now, maybe eventually some of these guys will get there, but not this year. And so C.J. Allen playing at the high level that he is something that this Georgia team needs for them to continue stacking wins. And if they're going to be a player in the SEC, some of these games have been close, but so far they've been able to pull out the victory. And C.J. Allen was a big reason why against the Gators. There was one play in the 2nd quarter, QB delayed run. Allen just jukes the guard and plants Lagway right away. He showed a little bit of everything in this game, because not only his ability to mirror the backfield vision at the line of scrimmage, but his range to unlock and go and make plays outside the numbers. We saw that as well. You don't see him a lot in man coverage, but he'll zone drop and he looks good doing that. So yeah, CJ Allen, I'm a big fan of him, and he is, to me, in between the 2 Ohio State linebackers. If I'm going to stack 1, 2, 3, it's Arvell Reese, CJ Allen, Sonny Styles, and Allen's firmly right there in that top 30 conversation.
Okay, we love Reese, but if we're taking out guys that have like a pass rush role, because that's CJ Allen is he's a prototypical off-ball linebacker. So is it Allen and Styles for you in terms of guys that are mainly off-ball?
Yeah, if we're gonna say strictly off-ball, nothing else, then yeah, Allen. And that's not how it was coming into it. Allen was my top. He was linebacker 1 for me coming into the year, and so strictly off-ball. To me, he has done nothing to take away that LB1 distinction from him.
And I don't want to give people the wrong impression. He wasn't bad earlier in the year, but it really feels like he is playing up to that pedigree that you like when you tell me that a Georgia linebacker reminds you of Roquan Smith, that conjures a certain image for me anyway, because Roquan's just one of the most slam dunk incredible prospects I can remember watching.
Yeah. It sets the bar high.
Yeah. But he is meeting it these last few weeks, I think. I think one last game ball, you wanted to throw one out to a guy in the Big 12, I believe.
Spencer Fano, right tackle for Utah. That was a big game. It was a late game. I don't know how many people saw it, but I was giving a lot of Cincinnati players love going into that game. But man, Utah, they pretty much dominated, and when they needed a yard, they went behind number 55 at right tackle. One of my favorite things is watching him on skip pulls, those power left plays. He's so quick, so efficient with his feet, with his hips. He can erase linebackers at the second level. This is an offensive tackle class that has been pretty underwhelming, and even Fano at times has not maybe lived up to some of the hype that we've put on him, but he's still been the most consistent of this group. So seeing him and what he's doing in the Big 12 this year, he's still to me O-line one in this draft, and I thought he played like it against Cincinnati on Saturday night.
Big 12 is exactly as goofy as you thought it might be. I mentioned Texas Tech and BYU have a big game coming up for first place in that conference, but Cincinnati's still ranked. Utah's been on a roll the last couple weeks, just rolling over people. Arizona State, a relatively shocking win, in my opinion, in Ames the other day, considering Sam Leavitt is now out for the year. Just entertainment every single weekend in that conference.
Was Tyson out? I think he was.
Yeah, you're right. He did not play in that game against the Cyclones. So down your top two playmakers, you get a road win. I guess that's just what you should expect from Big 12 football.
That's a good way to sum it up. It'll be fun to the end, and that's kind of what we expected from this conference.
All right, Dane, we call it building the beast. The whole point is to find prospects at every program, at every level of the draft. So I got excited when I saw one of your most recent pieces for The Athletic, and basically just looking at under the radar names, maybe guys that aren't splashing every week on a national level, like an Arvell Reese. Doesn't mean that there aren't good prospects all over the country. So I got a few names that I want to talk about, but I'll throw it to you. If we're looking for some under-discussed draftable prospects, where do you want to start? And then I'll kind of fill in from there.
Go out to the West Coast. San Diego State's having a really good year this year, and Chris Johnson at corner is a big reason why they're having success on defense. He is, I hate to say it comes down to the 40, but, it's corner is a stopwatch position, and so that matters. Some scouts are worried he might run a 4.55, but if he gets in the 4.4s, I think he'd go top 100. I mean, I think he can go. To me, he has tape of an NFL starter, and so the 40 might impact where he's drafted. I think Chris Johnson is going to start in the league. He could play man, can play zone, really calm, and his quickness and his ability to mirror off the line is impressive. Physical downfield, has a really just a natural feel for making plays on the football. I watch, you throw on the Cal game, throw on Northern Illinois, every single tape, he's making plays. And so Chris Johnson to me, and I talked to him, I don't know, maybe 2 months ago now, or sometime in September, talking to him on the phone, just getting a lot of background and finding out more about his story. He was like 5'2", 150 pounds as like a sophomore in high school. And so nobody knew about this guy until later on, and when he finally got recruited. He's younger for his age. I think he's still 20 years old right now. His parents started him early in kindergarten, a year early, so that's why he was so small as a sophomore in high school and kind of behind the eight ball physically when it comes to being recruited. But now as a fourth-year senior for the Aztecs, he's really emerging and showing, what he could be. So he's a standout on special teams. He had a blocked punt last year, makes plays, as a gunner. So there's just a lot that Chris Johnson offers. And to me, he's a very underrated player who is going to have an NFL future. And like I said, that 40 is probably going to determine where he's drafted. I don't care where he's drafted. He's going to have an NFL type of career.
I love talking about corner because it does feel like a murky position to me. Obviously, we've talked a lot about Mansour Delane at LSU. We like him very much. Avion Terrell at Clemson is another guy worth mentioning. Other than that, I mean, I know people talk and think highly of Jermod McCoy at Tennessee. We've mentioned him too, but
both Tennessee corners are good players, Colton Hood and then McCoy. But yeah, like McCoy coming back from the ACL, it just doesn't sound great that we're going to see him this year. So a little bit of a question mark on his name.
That was going to be my point. Is we haven't seen him, unfortunately, and so if you're looking for the top of this cornerback class, it gets a little murky after. And I'm not trying to slot the guy, but I just think we know and like Mansour Delane, and then everything else feels like it's up for interpretation. So San Diego State, they haven't lost since week 2 of this season. You mentioned the Cal win. I'm not trying to sell anybody on Cal being a world beater, but that's a Power 4 program. They beat the shit out of them, 34-0.
He had a pick 6 in that game.
Chris, I mean, he's been playing phenomenal football, and I think this feels like a name worth knowing. Like when you're talking about like the upper echelon of the corner position, like am I crazy to suggest? I get your point that it could come down to the 40 time, but like if he times well, it seems like he could have a shot at being like a first round or at least like a top 40 type of pick.
I don't know if we'll be able to get that high just because I don't think the physical traits are necessarily going to wow teams. Like that's not how scouts talk about him, I guess, because he has decent height. He's 6 foot. He's just 182 pounds. So he's very lean. And the straight line speed is definitely a question mark. It does show up a little bit on tape, not to the point where I would be super worried about drafting him, but I don't know that his, in terms of projection, I don't know if we're going to be talking about a price tag that high. But to your point, this is a corner class where, we'll see which underclassmen come out. But, how does he stack up with Igbinosun from Ohio State or Will Lee from Texas A&M or Dalen Everett, Georgia? These guys that are considered day 2 corners. Chris Johnson belongs in that conversation as a guy that, we should be talking about as a future NFL starter. Because, again, I watch his tape and I see an NFL starter. His ability to work inside, cover the slot, he can do that. Again, I mentioned his special teams. So, I don't know exactly, because I do think a lot will determine, or how he tests will determine a lot of exactly where he's drafted. I just know I see a good football player, and he's a guy that should be talked about more.
They have plenty of opportunity to stay on the radar. I mean, they're right in the thick of it for the Mountain West, and they are about to play like all of the good teams in the Mountain West. Like it's Hawaii this week, followed by Boise State. So if they're going to win that conference, they're going to have to win some big time games against some of the better teams in the league. So this is definitely putting San Diego State on my radar for this final month. And I think that Hawaii game is in Hawaii, so it'll be on late after you're done doing everything else on Saturday night.
And that's why he gets overlooked a little bit is, a lot of those games are late at night. People aren't watching them. But, Chris Johnson, if San Diego State's on TV, check them out.
Okay, I really love this because it's very much in the spirit of building the beast, because Boston College is 1-8, Dane. They won their season opener. They beat Fordham, and they have since lost 8 straight games. But I need to know about Logan Taylor, who in my preliminary research, the guy's played 3 spots on this offensive line and acquitted himself pretty nicely. So I am intrigued, and I love the idea of reminding people that even some of the very worst teams have some very, very good football players.
Well, shoot, let's go even further back. Born in Nova Scotia, okay? Like, this is a guy.
We're getting a Brugler special here, baby. Let's go.
He grew up in a basketball family. His dad's like 6'9". And in Nova Scotia, there's not a lot of football. But somewhere along the way, one of his buddies was playing on a team, got him to come out, and he turned into a pretty badass defensive lineman. And ends up going to high school in the States, and that's when COVID happened, so he went back, but was still able to get recruited, goes to Virginia. He was at Virginia for 2 years, and then he transferred to Boston College, which was closer to home for him. But yeah, he is a big dude, and he's not he's not a top tier athlete, and I think that's ultimately why we're not talking about him as a top 100 type of slam dunk, is because the quickness, the ability to move is more good than great. But he is a big dude with versatility, and I think that versatility is something that's going to help him when scouts really, or and coaches really get involved on him, because he's more of a guard. I like him at guard, but you watch him against Cal. I think it was against UConn. They put him at left tackle, and he more than held his own on those tapes. Now, they put him at right tackle against Notre Dame over the weekend, and it wasn't so good. But I think this is a more of a natural guard who can kick out the tackle in a pinch. So Logan Taylor, to me, he's someone that needs to be on the radar as a third, fourth round guy, and someone that is, I think, a little bit underrated. 6'6.5", 308 pounds. He's long. I think he's over 34-inch arms. There's just a lot to like there with the ability and the versatility.
You tell me a guy drafted on day 3 could, and I get it if he's better in some spots than others, but like if he can conceivably play 3 spots on your offensive line, that's how you make it. That's how you make a 53 right there, Dane.
No doubt. And look, I'm Mr. Don't Scout the Helmet. Look past the decal, but I don't know, something about Boston College offensive linemen. Like they seem to produce those guys, and I think Logan Taylor is certainly in that mix.
That Notre Dame game, football is just a heartbreaking sport, man. Like they've lost 7 straight games. They're playing their big rival in Notre Dame. They gave them hell for 3 quarters and change. Like it was nervy in the 4th quarter, and then you throw basically a goal line interception, and 1 snap later, Jeremiah Love is like, this is why I'm a top 15 pick, and he goes to the house from 94 yards out, and your best effort in 2 months just goes up in flames right in front of you.
I tweeted the end zone view of that touchdown, and the blocking was unbelievable. So like it was going to be a 10, 12-yard gain no matter what. But the burst from Love, and then the slalom to like just get a little bit, not a big weave, but just a little weave to get away from the proximity awareness with him is phenomenal. And so, yeah, I mean, we've talked about Jeremiah Love and how he's one of the best players in this draft. And, a play like that, just if you needed a reminder, there it is.
Just stick with the boring guys up front. Let's talk some offensive line here. Caleb Tiernan, the current left tackle at Northwestern, which you want to talk about a program where if you're doing things like I'm listening if I'm hearing about a Northwestern offensive lineman, Rashawn Slater, Peter Skowronski, 526 snaps at left tackle for the Wildcats this year per PFF. 7 pressures and 1 sack allowed.
Okay.
That seems good to me. How high are we on this guy? Because those are encouraging numbers.
So yeah, I think I cheated a little bit on Tiernan because with this article that I did on The Athletic was, I limited it to guys graded in that 3rd to 5th round mix, and Tiernan's going to go before the 3rd round. He's a good player, man. And it's not a big surprise when you go back and look at, okay, Ohio State wanted him, Michigan wanted him, Penn State wanted him. Like he was a pretty highly recruited kid come out of Michigan, and he chooses Northwestern and stayed loyal. This will be his 5th year at the program, and just throw on the Oregon tape, and how clean he was playing left tackle against a top tier opponent was awesome. The pass protection all year has been very, very just clean and almost perfect. So Tiernan is a player who I think is on the rise, and someone he'll go somewhere in the first 2 rounds. I'm starting to feel better about that.
I'll ask you the same question as we were talking about with Johnson. Like, is 1st round, does that feel realistic to you when this is all said and done?
With an offensive lineman, I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, he's he entered this year with like 30 straight starts, and he's, so like there's an Iron Man quality to him. Like he doesn't miss time. He's played both left tackle, right tackle. He's very controlled, and he's not a super elite mover, but he's very controlled. He's very efficient in his pass sets. He just makes it tough for guys to get around him. Talking to scouts, he's very quiet in terms of demeanor, but it's like he's naturally introverted. But the coaching staff has really pushed him to become more of a leader, and they say that's exactly what he's done this year, which is what they were hoping to see. So, inconsistent knee bend. I think he needs to be a little bit better in terms of hitting his targets at the second level, but these are not things that are going to keep teams from drafting him if they are looking for offensive linemen. So I wouldn't be shocked at all if he snuck up into the top 40 or higher, because every team needs offensive linemen, and this guy looks like a future NFL starter.
One other guy I wanted to highlight, we were just talking about CJ Allen. You think about Georgia linebackers and what that entails. I don't get those vibes when I think about the Tennessee defense, and maybe that's just because they're in a shootout every damn week. So you point out that Arion Carter at Tennessee leads the SEC in tackles. No, like tackles aren't created equally, right? I mean, Tennessee they're playing 30 to 40 point shootouts every other week. So I'm curious what you see watching him as opposed to just the raw stat totals, and how impressive of a player has Arion Carter been this year?
Yeah, he's just a very instinctive player. And they'll use him, you'll see him blitz. It was the Syracuse tape. He had a really nice coffee house blitz. The way he reads the backfield is really impressive. So I think I was told he's kind of 50-50 on whether or not he comes out. He's a third-year junior, so a true junior could go back if things are. I think he entered the year as kind of like a 4th, 5th round pick, but he keeps moving up. I think right now I would put him in a 3rd round, but if he gets even better feedback from scouts, maybe he does come out. So I know Tennessee is desperately trying to keep a hold of him, because they've already got a few guys that are probably going to leave early. Mentioned those 2 corners with Hood and McCoy. Brazil probably comes out to the receiver. So I think Tennessee, they look at Carter as maybe one of those guys they could keep. And so we'll see how he finishes this next month. But I think Carter, he'll have a big NFL decision to make here pretty soon.
One of the biggest Tennessee Vanderbilt games maybe ever on the horizon.
Yeah,
I mean,
no
that's
kidding.
not until Thanksgiving weekend, but I'm already excited about it, because that's usually I don't know how many people outside the state of Tennessee are getting excited for that matchup normally, but I am personally very excited for it this year.
That loss to Texas was big for Vanderbilt in terms of just, taking them down a peg if they want to reach the playoffs, if they want to be considered a true playoff contender. But I still feel like they have everything in front of them. If they win out, they're probably going to get in as a 2-loss SEC team. So it's even though that was a tough loss and they fought till the end, and they only lost by 3 at the end of the day, I think it was. But this is a team that still has everything in front of them. Maybe not an SEC title game, we'll see. But if they win out, they're still very much in that playoff discussion. So yeah, to your point, that's going to be a huge game at the end of the year.
We've mentioned a few other guys on your list. We've talked about Katron Allen, the running back at Penn State. We've mentioned Nicky Prongos, the O tackle at Stanford. Is there anybody else in your story that you want to highlight here?
There's a couple tight ends I think make sense for that. Justin Jolie from NC State. He's a fun story because he was like 190-pound wide receiver coming out of high school and barely got recruited. UConn finally, at like the last minute, took him on, and he really developed his frame. He's up to 250 pounds now, transferred to NC State. He's a really good player, really athletic. Reminds me a lot like a Jonnu Smith type of tight end. So I think he'll go in the 3rd round. Eli Stowers from Vanderbilt, another one of those guys. He had 2 touchdowns, over 100 yards against Texas over the weekend. He's also kind of in that 3rd round where and I think he's going to test really well, which might give him a little bit of a bump once we get to draft season. So tight ends got a few. Um, Austin Barber, the left tackle at Florida, he's another one of those guys. We talk about offensive linemen going pretty early. He's he's got his warts, but size, he moves pretty well. He's a smart player, and I think that teams are going to see him as okay. He's a little bit more of a developmental player than we want, but there are starts in his future, and so I think somewhere top 75, top 80 could be a place for him. So yeah, we could seriously we could go for hours talking about these third round, fourth round, fifth round types who definitely have their warts, definitely have something about them that is holding them back a little bit, but they're still fun to talk about because you look at them and you can see NFL talent. There's something about them that says, yeah, that'll translate, that'll give them a chance. And so, yeah, we'll talk more about some of these guys as we get closer and things start to firm up. But I'm glad we were able to hit on a few of them today.
Barber is one of those guys who you get intrigued just by watching the quality of competition that he's played, like going against Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor with Miami, Cassius Howell, Texas A&M. He went against the LSU front. They just played Georgia. So when it comes time for draft season where you're putting these guys tape on throughout January and March, you're going to have no problem finding plays of him going against the very best, which I think is always that's a feather in a guy's cap. Even if you don't always win those matchups, it's nice to know what you're looking at when you evaluate a college player, you know?
That stuff matters so much. There's a big difference between, going up against that type of schedule and then going up against, some of these other guys, what they have to face. And so, yeah, Barber's a guy that doesn't have that elite arm length, pad level's a little high, anchor's not great, but quick-footed. I mean, you can tell that he's been playing a long time with the depth that he gets in his pass sets, the way that he finishes, really physical player. So, and scouts have told me that he could have had more money elsewhere, but he took less to stay at Florida this past year for his final year. So he had a few good reps. I know it came in a loss to Georgia, but watching that tape yesterday, he had some really good reps against a pretty good Georgia front.
Just a short sample of the many guys that we will continue to discuss as we build the beast, but I definitely wanted to try to highlight some guys other than the consensus top 20, top 25 prospects. Before we get out of here, I do just want to take a quick look at week 11, Dane, and my overall takeaway from the week 11 slate is this is just a big opportunity for teams to show how they handle a big road test, because that is a pretty consistent through line for a lot of the best teams in college football. Indiana, we know at this point what Penn State's season is, but that is a road game to Happy Valley for an Indiana team that, as good as they are, still hasn't played in a whole lot of situations like this. BYU is on the road at Texas Tech, where the Red Raiders are undefeated this year. A&M, how about that? I think this is my favorite one of the weekend, Dane. The A&M offensive line on the road in Columbia against Zion Young and Damon Wilson and that Missouri pass rush that we've talked about so much. And you also get Dante Moore going to face Iowa at Kinnick Stadium. So lot of tough environments for a lot of playoff hopefuls and NFL hopefuls here.
Yeah, you mentioned a few of them there. That Florida State at Clemson, like I get it. Clemson's been a dumpster. I get it, but they still got guys on that defense that are going to be high draft picks, and so seeing how they do against Florida State will be pretty important. Yeah, I'm with you on Missouri. That feels like a trap game for A&M. Like A&M's the way that they've been playing on offense, on defense. They deserve to be a top 3 team in the rankings, but it's hard in the SEC week in, week out to keep stacking these wins, and going to Missouri will not be easy with Zion Young, with Damian Wilson, with the guys they have in that front. That'll be a tough one. So yeah, that'll be a good game. You mentioned with Moore, another test for him in a road environment. That Indiana game really showed still just how inexperienced he is. And this game will kind of be a chance for him to remind people, okay, this is why, I'll have an NFL decision to make after the year because I can still do this at a high level. And look, we saw Fernando Mendoza go to Iowa earlier this year and struggle. They needed a lot of things to break Indiana's way to get out of Iowa with a win. And so how will Oregon acquit themselves in that environment at Kinnick? That'll be a lot of fun.
You know this better than most, Dane. Iowa City can be a nightmare for a Big Ten title hopeful in the later parts of the year. I get it. Like, we can make jokes about Iowa's offense over the years, and it's a program that really loves the value of special teams, but that can be a very tough place to get a win on the road. I am very interested to see how Oregon handles that.
No doubt. That'll be a fun one. So, yeah, this is, LSU at Alabama. We got to mention it, even though I get it.
I would, we have to mention it. No, we do. Look, if the funny thing is, look, LSU's obviously the disappointment of all disappointments. It's us and Clemson, which ironically we opened the season against each other. So goes to show, never get too high after week
Simpler
one,
times.
because you never know where a season's going to go. But this is, between these two teams, you're still talking about a boatload of NFL prospects on both sides of the ball. And LSU defense hasn't acquitted itself as nicely over the last couple games as it did in the early going, but I still think this will be a fun test for Ty Simpson.
Yeah.
We mentioned Mansour Delane, a shot for him to showcase himself against
Bernard,
who I think is the best quarterback going in college football right now, and his receiver options. Yeah, there's a lot to be intrigued about from an evaluating talent standpoint, even if I'm not really excited about what the final score might be.
Well, and Nussmeier too. Like, for Nussmeier, how much guilt he probably feels after head coach and offensive coordinator gone. Like he probably feels some of that burden. Like, if I would have played a little bit better in this game or done this, like maybe that does it. Now, I think that's unfair. Like, it's not on Nussmeier that what happened at LSU. But this is a chance for, okay, let's see how mentally tough you are. Let's see how you bounce back now. You just had a bye week to think about it. You go to Tuscaloosa. This is a chance to put all that behind you and go make a statement. So, yeah, I don't think LSU is going to win this game, but it's still a chance for some of these players to put good stuff on tape to, help themselves throughout the process.
You talk about the dead cat bounce when a team fires its head coach, and it's very normal to see a team rally around the interim head coach and play its best football of the year in a situation like this. This is me, the fan, speaking, not me, somebody trying to evaluate things fairly, but like, I'll believe that when I see it, when it comes to LSU playing Alabama. Like, yeah. I just don't buy it. It takes an act of God and Joe Burrow to beat Alabama, especially in Tuscaloosa. So we'll see how that goes.
You're not wrong.
But regardless, we will be here on the other side of the week to recap it, to break it all down. And like we said, next week we will have Dane's November top 50 to dive into. I am really looking forward to doing that. We will not ignore what happens over the college football weekend, but we will definitely do an in-depth look at the top 50. Really looking forward to that. Until then, we appreciate it. As always, for Dane, I am Dave. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for watching. Follow the Athletic Football Show wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube.